Welcome to Financial Issues, where we join reality with truth, helping you make the most of your money by honoring God with your investments. Now listen in as we give you the practical tools and advice you need to become a biblically responsible investor.
Welcome back to Financial Issues, everybody. It's great to be here with you. Seth Udinski hanging with you this morning. We appreciate you spending your morning here with us, folks. Welcome to the show. Happy to have all of you. Hey, we got a busy show today. Later on in the show, I've got financial advisor Andy Thrift. He's going to join me to discuss the savvy ways that Christians can keep their money out of the greedy paws of Uncle Sam and deploy it for God's glory. I'm a big fan of that. I'm sure many of you are as well. So you're going to want to stay tuned for that. That's going to be later in the show. Also, your comments and questions. Speaking of which, chat. Good morning, chat. I would love for you to answer this question for me, please. If you're in the chat, give me an answer to this question. Keep it short. You can go long if you want to. That's okay. I don't think there's a word limit in our chat. Is there ever a time when you should not tithe? The question is there ever a time where you should not tithe? We'll take a stab at that later on in the show. I'm grateful for each of you. I'm especially grateful for my friend who is back from vacation, Sam Case. Sam,
my first day back, and he's coming with the hard-hitting questions. Should we or should we not tithe? Right. The answer might surprise you.
That's right. I'm keeping you on your toes, Sam. No, dude, we missed you last week. It's great to have you back.
Yeah, I'm glad the place is still here.
Yep, we survived, as it were. We are
the
survivors.
Samless week.
That's right. We survived the Samless week. So grateful for Sam. Hey, also, folks, be on the lookout for partner commentary. That'll be up probably in the next 24 hours, I'd say. Look out for it later this evening. Or if you go to bed early, check it out first thing in the morning. You'll probably see it there. So great to have each of you this morning. Thanks for joining us, however you're listening or watching. Take a look at the markets here quick to start the show, folks. So after a winning week, yesterday the indices, they're relatively muted. So investors were digesting the latest updates on U.S. foreign trade deals. Of course, the big one over the weekend was the deal that the United States set with the EU. By midday, the major averages were mostly positive, but only moderately so. The tech-heavy NASDAQ was leading the way. The afternoon, the indices kind of retreated a bit. The Dow Jones and the S&P sank towards the flat line. By late afternoon, it was the same. By the closing bell, the Dow Jones finished slightly below the flat line. The S&P 500 was barely positive. It was basically a flat line finish, but technically it was positive. And for the S&P 500, it was a sixth straight all-time high finish. So it kept a little streak going there for the S&P. The NASDAQ, meanwhile, was the big winner of the day, up about 1/3 of a percentage point. As of this morning, continuing relatively positive are the major indices as they're looking at some earnings reports that we're having. Of course, also keeping an eye on what's coming later on in the week. And I just want to remind you folks, we're kind of entering the busy season of this week. So we get a double dose of Magnificent Seven earnings. Tomorrow, I believe it's Meta and Microsoft. And then Thursday is going to be Amazon and Apple. Also, tomorrow, we get the Federal Reserve announcing its interest rate decision. So you can expect the markets. Actually, Sam, let me ask you this. Do you think the markets will be more calm this week or maybe not as calm this week with all that stuff going on there?
They're going to probably be so zen. They're going to be like so the Buddha. Happy. It's amazing. They're going to be levitating in their zenness.
Absolutely. No, folks, you can expect, listen, I'm not saying that this will happen, but it might not be your typical calm week. The markets might shoot up. They might go down. Just be ready for that. That could happen for sure. Now, again, it might not if we get some strong earnings reports, if the markets seem at least to be somewhat pleased with whatever the Fed decides, which I guess the jury's still out.
But is that calm? If they do cut interest rates and the Mag 7 does well, that's not exactly calm. That's excitement.
Right. That's going to be excitement. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
and there is not a 0% chance that the Fed will cut rates. Yeah. Trump seems to think they will, but we'll have to see.
Yep. So we'll just have to see what happens there, folks. Exactly right. But at any rate, Sam, speaking of Trump, I would love to get your thoughts on this headline here. So we saw yesterday Trump set a global baseline tariff between 15 and 20%. What can you tell us about that, Sam?
Right. This comes on the heels of his big deal with the EU, saying clock's ticking. The bell is about to toll for everyone else if you don't have a deal, so you better get in line. President Donald Trump said the baseline tariff, as you said, would be in the range of 15 to 20%, probably one of those two numbers, quote, in his words. His comments come just days before the August 1st tariff deadline, as dozens of countries have still not reached those trade deals with the United States. He simply says there's not enough time to make those deals with everyone. He said you can't sit down and make deals with 200 countries.
Yeah, so that's just one more thing to be looking out for this week as well, that we have that tariff deadline there. So interesting stuff.
And it should be noted that if a country doesn't currently have a deal with Donald Trump and these tariffs do come online, Howard Lutnick says they still could negotiate. So even after August 1st, we still could get some more deals.
Sure. Yep. Absolutely. We also get some earnings calls out today, folks. Nothing to sneeze at, but we do get Verizon and United Health. So I saw some headlines saying that it looks like United Health, the earnings will be worse than expected, which, comes to be expected in the middle of the lawsuit that they're in right now over the perhaps suspect Medicare billing practices.
And I believe they said for the whole year. I might have misread that title, but I don't think it was just for the quarter.
I think
they said all of 2025, it's not going to look too hot.
Yep, that's exactly right. Procter & Gamble beat this morning. Nothing too crazy there, but that was what we're seeing from the earnings calls. So once again, nothing crazy today. Tomorrow, I think, will be more of the big day. Same with Thursday as well. And even Friday's nothing to sneeze at. We'll get Berkshire Hathaway on Friday. So, all right, Sam, let's take a look. So we got a question from Brian that I thought was interesting. I think we can take a look at this one. What is Brian saying?
Brian is asking about TE91 and TE57, and he wants to know if they are still BRI.
Well, Brian, thanks for that question. I appreciate that. Right now, so technically, according to our screening, they are still BRI, but they're on BRI watch right now. I can't give a solid answer at this point as to if they will still be buys if they survive their BRI screening, basically. That's really what we're looking at right now. They sit on BRI watch, which means, folks, for your purposes, Brian, this is for you, this is for everyone else who's wondering, they are a hold for you. Until we figure out what's going on here, they are a hold. Shana had actually mentioned TE91 on the conference call. I would highly encourage each and every one of you to please go back and listen to that. Even if you listened to the conference call already, go back and listen to what Shana talked about with TE91. I believe it was in the latter half of the conference call. I think it was in the partner questions section. I might have to go back and confirm that. But it would be well worth it for you to listen to the whole conference call again anyway. But particularly with that, because she said some really good things about it. Unfortunately, there's some warning signs we're seeing with this one that could possibly lead to a sell for BRI reasons. Hence the reason why it's on BRI watch in the first place.
But I would say don't let that spook you and preemptively sell it.
Exactly. Yeah, that's very important, Sam. You're exactly right. When a stock goes on the hold list, that's not a sell. And when it goes on BRI watch, that's not a sell necessarily. That's not a sell yet. The hope is it's on BRI watch for the purpose of us doing some deeper research to see what's going on, because we've heard some rumors. There are things that maybe we're thinking, okay, could this company be dipping into non-BRI territory, which could be very dangerous for us? That's that new category that we added on the website, folks. We didn't have that on the old website. We have it now. Basically, it's treated as a hold until further notice, where we're looking into this company to see, okay, are these rumors that they're engaging in such and such a thing true? For example, say it was rumored that a company sponsored a gay pride parade or something like that.
You'd have this a lot during the height of the DEI movement, the DEI nonsense, which isn't exactly the same as being not BRI. But if a company's doing a lot of things associated with the DEI programs and policies, that would likely be a company that's going to be on the BRI watch. We can't prove they're not BRI just yet, but they're doing some things. There's some smoke there, so let's find out if there's actually fire or it's just a misconception.
Yep, it's the old saying, Sam, where there's smoke, there's fire. If you see smoke, there will be fire there. But the question is it a nice contained fire in a fire pit, or is it a blaze that's consuming a whole house? That's really kind of what we're trying to look at here. The hope and prayer is that the rumors are unfounded, in which case the holding returns to being a regular hold for our purposes. So, Brian, to your question, while a company's on BRI watch, it's still a hold. It's still a hold. And so I'll
add that it can stay on BRI watch for quite some time, because these things do take some time to clarify.
Absolutely. And keep in mind, now once a company's on BRI watch, in order to get back to buy status, which is what you're asking, Brian, it now has to jump through two hoops. So it has to survive the BRI scrutiny, but then it also has to go back to a place where it could potentially be a good buy. So say it survives BRI scrutiny, it's just back to the hold list. It might be up near all-time highs. It might not be the best buying opportunity if you're placing new money into it anyway. So we might still keep it on the hold list for quite some time. And then we'll see, If there's signs of long-term growth, it could go higher, or if there's a sell-off, it comes back down a little bit, then you might see it go back onto the buy list. I'm not saying that's the case for these in particular, because again, we're just going to have to wait and see as we, kind of come to an understanding of what's going on with these companies in particular. But Brian, that's a good question. I hope that can help you, and I hope that can help some other people who are wondering that also. Folks, it did remind me, just to remind all of you, please do play around with the new website. It's so helpful for us to know what things are working, what things aren't working. That, again, what we just mentioned, that BRI Watch is a new website feature. There's a lot of new website features. We've heard some wonderfully positive feedback about the website. So if you like it, if you like what you see, I would highly encourage you, keep on playing around with it, especially if you've got a really robust, well-diversified portfolio. That just means you'll be using the tools even more and more. So good stuff, Brian. Thanks for that question there. All right, folks, we'll get to another question coming up on the other side. As well as that question, is there ever an appropriate time not to tithe? I want to hear your answers, folks. Should you ever not tithe? Get to some of these later on in the program. More financial issues up right after this.
Navigating through investment options can be challenging, especially when you're determined to uphold your God-given values. Every dollar you invest is a vote for the world that you want to live in. Let your values guide your investment decisions and help to shape the culture in which we live. Become a beacon of light and pave the way with biblically responsible investing. Timothy Plan, where faith and finance collide. Before investing, carefully consider the fund's investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses of the investment company. This and other important information can be found in the fund's prospectus. To obtain a copy, visit timothyplan.com or call 800-846-7526. Read each prospectus carefully before investing. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal.
Do you love financial issues? Did you know you can catch the show anytime at financialissues.org? But that's not all. Financial Issues is also available on multiple platforms, including Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Rumble. You can listen on your favorite device wherever and whenever it's convenient for you. Whether you're at home sipping coffee, commuting to work, or enjoying a workout, Financial Issues is just a click away. Don't miss a moment. Stay connected to Financial Issues and make the most of your money by honoring God with your investments.
If a woman sees her baby on ultrasound, it doubles the likelihood that she'll choose life. And on top of that, we share the gospel of Jesus Christ with her. This is why you should support preborn. The donations that you give actually make a difference. Last year, 59,000 babies were saved because of what you have done with your generosity.
To find out how you can support the life-saving mission of preborn, go to preborn.com/FISM.
Securities offered through G.A. Reppel & Company, a registered broker-dealer and investment advisor, member FINRA and SIPC. Opinions expressed by Shana are hers alone and are for informational purposes only and do not necessarily represent those of G.A. Reppel or the outlet on which you are listening. You should consider how the information applies to your situation prior to personally implementing it and consult any financial professional you work with to make sure it's applicable to your financial plan.
Welcome back, everyone. Good to see you this morning. I see several answers to my question in the chat there, so we'll get to those in just a moment here if we have time in this segment. Speaking of questions, actually, you know what? Before we do questions, I should mention the pre-markets, all positive right now as the market's slated to open in about 10 minutes or so. The Dow is just above the flat line. The S&P is about a fifth above, and the NASDAQ is about 2/5 above.
Eager beavers this week, Seth.
That's right, Sam.
Although I don't know what's so eager about beavers compared to other
really
animals.
Either, other than that it sort of rhymes, I guess.
It sounds nice. They're industrious.
That's exactly right.
There's that.
Yeah. Industrious beavers. Doesn't roll off the tongue quite as much, even if it's more true. Totally agree. All right, Sam, let's get to another question here. Joseph is asking about cryptocurrency. What does he have to say?
Joseph asks a very relevant question with some of the headlines we're dealing with this month. He says, is cryptocurrency BRI? I do have a little bit of crypto crypto, and I'm not sure if I should just sell it and then invest in something else.
Joseph, it's a good question. It's one that we will get from time to time. Before I give my answer, let's hear what Shana has to say about this, because she's referenced this before. She actually answered recently another question sort of similar to yours. It was from another partner. I believe that we have that clip here. So let's hear what Shana has to say first, then I'll add my comments as well, Joseph. Wanda, couple questions for you. Maybe we can take these piece by piece, Shana. She says, I looked at Dan's video comments on cryptocurrency. I still have a few questions. Here's my first one. Since the original Bitcoin, not the offshoots, is not owned by any person or company, how do you measure if it's BRI?
So the way that we measure a company for BRI, for biblically responsible, is the company. When you buy shares of stock, you're becoming an owner of a company. Now, you don't get to make the day-to-day decisions about what happens with the company's resources, about whether they pay for their employees to travel across state lines and get an abortion, whether they donate money to a gay pride parade or festival, whether they support legislation that is anti-family and tries to push marriage as something that it's not. You don't get to make those day-to-day decisions. You're delegating that authority to the board of directors and the CEO, but you're expecting them to generate a return for you, but you don't want them to generate a return that involves you having to compromise on your Christian convictions, on your moral convictions. Crypto is considered to be neutral because it's more like a commodity than there's no decisions to be made there. So, Bitcoin is not going to force you, buying Bitcoin or cryptocurrency is not going to force you to do anything with that asset that is against your moral conviction. So that's why it's neutral when it comes to whether or not it's biblically responsible.
So, Joseph, hope that's helpful there. I agree with what Shana said. There's nothing inherently morally suspect from a BRI perspective about cryptocurrency. Like she just said there, it's neutral. In the same way that you would say the dollar is neither BRI or non-BRI.
And that tends to be the argument. That's a good comparison, because the one argument that will come up that it's not BRI, I don't agree with this, but the argument goes something like, well, cryptocurrency, because it's not regulated and it can't really be traced all that well, is a favored currency of drug dealers, criminals, terrorists, all kinds of people like that. But so is cash money. Also for similar reasons, that it can't easily be traced, and we don't have a problem using cash just because nasty people use it. Also, I want to say, just like with cash, crypto is similar in that when you buy, say, a Bitcoin, I'm not recommending you do, but I'm just saying, let's say you did buy one, you just own that one Bitcoin. So it's different from a stock, and in that only you own what you own. It really does not affect what other people are doing with that amount that you have.
That's really well said, Sam. And back to what you had said about the money being used by evil people. You're exactly right. Cash can be used by those people as well. And let's not forget, for thousands of years before cash, that money was called gold. And gold was used in that same way. And it's the same with gold too. It's neither BRI or non-BRI. It's a neutral phenomenon. I think the question we have to get to here, Sam, with this, and Joseph, hopefully this can be helpful with you. Cryptocurrency is not a question of a moral investment versus immoral, but it's wise versus unwise. It's a question of wisdom versus, to your point, what you had just brought up about the money being used by drug traffickers and terrorists. I think you do need to consider, is crypto a wise investment in that regard, because it can be accessed by these sort of evil folks. I can remember, Dan Celia used to talk all the time, about how there would be millions and millions of cryptocurrencies that would just get lost every year. And so stuff like that, it's just a consideration for you. Now, there are some arguments.
And when it gets lost, I don't think there's really any way to retrieve it.
There's no way to track it. You don't know where it is. Now, there's also the flip side of that is a lot of people argue that certain cryptocurrencies are more secure, at least in the sense of they're protected from inflation. And, that's certainly, I think that's a really, really good argument. But nonetheless, I don't think that takes away the point either, that there are still a lot of questions about the security of it as a whole. So really, I think it comes down to, it's not moral versus immoral as much as it is wise versus unwise. A lot of life is like this. I was thinking about this yesterday, Sam. Is it sinful for me to go home today and to take a bite out of my lawnmower?
Probably not.
Probably not, but it's stupid. It's really not smart. It would hurt my teeth. It would harm my mouth. It's not necessarily sinful, but it's not wise. And that's really the point there. It's an extreme example. But if something is unwise, we still shouldn't do it. Now, again, I'm not saying necessarily that all cryptocurrency investment is something that you should not do. But I am saying that's really what the question is that we have to ask.
Bitcoin and, say, Fartcoin are very different things.
Very different things. Exactly right.
And the markets will show you that.
Certainly will. Yeah, and you throw Pepe coin in there and all those other ones, and you can see there's some crazy cryptocurrencies out there. But it's very speculative. It really is. It tends to be volatile. There's little in terms of regulations. It's still kind of the Wild West of investing. Because of all this, Joseph, we really feel like the long-term investor should think long and hard about if crypto is really the right move. If you're aiming for a robust long-term portfolio that's going to be sustained. We believe it would fit much better for that type of portfolio. A long-term portfolio would be much better for you to invest in the options that we offer on our buy list.
So then the question is, he owns the Bitcoin or whatever he owns. Right. I'm not sure what he owns, and he wants to know, should he sell it? What should he do with that?
That's a good question, Joseph. So here's what I'd tell you once again. If you're looking for a good, solid, long-term investment pool, I would check out the equities, mutual funds, and ETFs on our list. We don't have any particular cryptocurrencies on our list. I believe there's one company right now that is involved in the trading of cryptocurrency.
And it's a hold.
It is not in and of itself a cryptocurrency. So even that is not cryptocurrency. Whether or not to sell it, I think is up to you. I think it really is up to you. I don't know your particular situation. You might have been one of those people who bought, say, Bitcoin, for example, back in 2021 when it was down and it's now near all-time highs. I'm not sure if that is you or not, but perhaps that is. Maybe you've held it for a while. You're up in it. You have then two potentially good options before you. You can let it ride, or you can get out and sell it and take the gains. I really think that is up to you, honestly. And that's part of where the do-it-yourself part comes into this. The one thing I would tell you, Joseph, is if you're going to sell it, I would tell you try not to time the market with it. If you have a conviction to sell it, just sell it. Don't wait until tomorrow to see, well, maybe it's going to go up a little bit, or I'll try to get in today because I'm worried that it's going to go down. If you're convicted to sell it, just sell it. I think that would be the smart thing for you to do. I think ultimately you seek the Lord with that. It sounds to me, though, like the fact that you're asking the question, at least your conscience is somewhat pricked to give it a second look. I'm not saying that your conscience is pricked where you're like, I must sell this now, I must get out of it because it's not wise. You might just be needing to take a second look and to pray about it. And again, it's not because crypto's not BRI, but because perhaps it might not be the wisest investment choice for you. That makes sense, Sam? Do you think that covered it? I hope so.
I think that's true. And I think the investment choice is it's a little more complicated here since he already owns it. Yeah, when it comes to actually purchasing it, that's where the wisdom comes in. Now, for him, the wisdom is going to be whether or not to sell it is now the right time or not.
Yeah. I think that's exactly right. Joseph, appreciate that question, man. I hope that helped you there. All right, folks, let's do a little chat rundown. A lot of you have answered my question that I asked earlier in the show. Is there ever a time where you are not required to tithe? I'm just going to share some of these answers and we'll see how this
sneak
goes
peek.
Here.
You're going to wet the whistle for next segment's topic?
Yep. So Nelson is saying tithing. I agree in principle. We should always tithe. Unfortunately, right now to provide for a current family situation, certain people, Nelson's even shared, he's been in this as well, have had to drop to bare minimum tithing. Hopefully that is a temporary spot there. Nelson, I appreciate you sharing that. Absolutely. George from Bethlehem, North Carolina, saying tithing between each person and God. It's the only place in the Bible where God invites us to test him. According to the Bible, I cannot think of a time where we should not. So right there, two really good answers that fall maybe on the opposite side of the spectrum. John saying somewhere in the Bible, aren't we told that you need to take care of your family first? John, that is in the Bible, and we'll get to that.
John might be reading our notes.
I think he got a copy of our notes.
Yeah, Seth, I really like Brian's here. He says tithing is all about the heart. There are certainly times one may not be able to tithe, and I believe God fully understands and accepts that. Greed or self-gratification over the tithe would not be good for one's relationship with God, though.
Well said, Brian from Virginia. That's really good. Similar one, Sam. Stephen from Oklahoma saying, we're saved by grace. We live in grace. God knows the heart. Pray, move on, make changes. God will provide. in his time. I think it's well said, guys. Honestly, Eddie, here's one more interesting one. Eddie from Tennessee saying the minimum tithe is 10%. The Old Testament speaks of multiple tithes up to 30%. Eddie, I'm glad you brought that up. Sam and I were talking about that before the show. We focus so heavily on 10%, but if you actually read the scriptures, if we really wanted to go based on the Old Testament law, it would be a lot more than 10%. Be a lot more.
And it wouldn't just be money.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You're talking 10% of everything that you own, meaning 10% of the sourdough that my wife just made yesterday, 10% of the gasoline in your car, 10% of this, that, and the other thing. The Bible speaks, Eddie says, of being a cheerful giver with our tithes and offerings. The Lord owns it all. I think that we should. Interesting stuff for sure there. So, folks, we'll get to those comments. Boy, you guys are sharing some great thoughts there. Part of the reason I wanted to ask this question is simply because I think it's more complicated than just a simple yes or no. It's more complicated than, is there ever an appropriate time not to tithe? The answer is no, you should always tithe. I do think it's more complicated than that. What it does not do is it does not undercut what the Bible teaches. What I'm trying to do is bring more clarity to this so that, for example, if you're in a situation where you have to make a choice, where you can make a sound, wise choice knowing that you're honoring God no matter which way you go. So we'll talk about that on the other side of this break. Folks, if you have to leave us, I do hope you have a great rest of the day. Again, we're also going to hear from Andy Thrift later on in the show. He's going to share some great thoughts about funding the kingdom of God and keeping that money out of the greedy, grubby paws of Uncle Sam. We'll be back after this.
Where's Mima? We found out Shepard's diagnosis when I was about 17 weeks pregnant. We learned that he was going to need a series of surgeries after he was born in order to give him what they considered a normal life. And we weren't sure how this worked.
Yeah, very emotional, very, very broken. And as my wife just said, not sure how this worked. And called Samaritan, and they said, you just go have that baby. You leave the rest to us.
And just to hear the confidence on the other end of the phone of this is not something that you need to be concerned about at all. You focus on the health of your family, the health of your baby, and we will walk with you every step of the way.
If you're like me and used to think managing your investments was overwhelming or just for the experts, think again. I used to believe I needed a financial analyst to handle everything, but financial issues showed me I could manage my own investments while staying true to my faith. It's completely transformed how I handle my finances. What felt like a foreign language is now simple. I can buy and sell stocks with confidence, knowing my investments align with my faith. And the best part, this empowering, life-changing guidance is affordable, just $132 a year. FISM gave me the tools to restructure my portfolio, diversify, and track my investments. Their video library taught me how to steward what God has entrusted to me with wisdom. If you're ready to gain financial peace and manage your investments with purpose, I can't recommend Financial Issues enough. It's something anyone can do.
To learn more, go to financialissues.org.
When a woman comes into a center, she's being pressured from her family, from her friends, by her circumstances, by the rhetoric of the culture to believe that this is a quick and easy way out. If a woman sees her baby on ultrasound, it doubles the likelihood that she'll choose life. And on top of that, we share the gospel of Jesus Christ with her. This is why you should support preborn. The donations that you give actually make a difference. Last year, 59,000 babies were saved because of what you have done with your generosity. And so we just encourage you to make a difference at whatever degree you can, whether you can do a $28 contribution for one ultrasound, whether you can underwrite an ultrasound machine for $15,000 or 10 ultrasound machines for $150,000. Where does the Lord have you so that you can make a difference?
To find out how you can support the life-saving mission of Preborn, go to preborn.com/FISM.
Welcome back, folks. Financial issues. The markets are keeping an eye on tomorrow's Fed rate decision. As they just opened, the Dow Jones slightly negative. The S&P 500 is up about 0.2%. NASDAQ up 0.5% as we open this morning. Okay, let's get to it here, Sam. The question of the hour. Many of you shared your comments in the last segment. I appreciate those a lot. Is there ever an appropriate time not to tithe? It was pretty funny because Nelson, our Lord Father in the chat there, said we didn't stir up enough controversy over the segments on retirement. Yeah, that's true, Nelson. Talk about that. How about Social Security also? You remember that one? We stirred up some controversy there. About to do the same thing here, but let me try my best to answer this question.
Listen, it's not fun listening to someone who is just milquetoast and says what you want to hear.
If we agreed with everything, that would be a boring show. Okay, that would be a boring show. No, we want to have fun here. So
that's why Seth's going to right now say you should never tithe. No, I'm kidding. He's not going to say that.
That's right. Here's what I will say, okay? I believe that tithing is a biblical command. I do believe it looks different than it did in the old covenant because we live under the new covenant. But I believe it's a biblical command. The purpose of tithing is, first of all, to remind us that everything belongs to God, to be generous, but also specifically the practical purpose of it is to fund our spiritual leaders. So today, the purpose of the tithe, I believe, if you break it down, is to pay the pastor's salary and to keep the lights on in the church and other things like that. Meaning, the answer to the above question, is there ever an appropriate time not to tithe, is for you, probably not. However, there could be nuance in this when it comes to the tithe. I can think of 2 times where there would be some more nuance here to say, okay, maybe not right now or holding off. You may come across these in your life. You may already have. Here's option 1.
Seth, can I clarify something?
Please, Sam,
when you're saying tithing, are you explicitly meaning 10%, or do you just mean
that's a good question.
Giving in some way that's sacrificial? What do you mean by that?
What I mean by that, and I'm glad you said that, Sam, because even the very word tithe comes from a tenth. The tithe that we live under in the new covenant is not a numerical number. It's really not. You can do 10%. I think 10% is a good benchmark. But truthfully, my belief is that the amount that you should tithe is whatever amount the Lord has laid on your heart. And I would also throw in a dash of any amount that makes you slightly uncomfortable.
I was going to say, that's what C.S. Lewis said. He was talking about the tithe in one of his books. And he said, well, that's an Old Testament idea. And really, what we as Christians are called to do is to be generous and giving. That's what we're repeatedly called to do. And he says, what's the metric? He's like, well, maybe the metric should be that you should be a tad uncomfortable with the money you're giving away.
That's right. Just a tad, too. It's not like you're saying, okay, here's the deal. I got my paycheck. I'm giving 70% of it to my church. What am I going to have left? If you're uncomfortable, or let me put it this way, if you're comfortable at 8%, you should probably give 10%. Right, Sam? Does that sound reasonable? If you're comfortable at 10%, try giving 12%. If you're comfortable
or at least 9%. Push yourself a little bit.
Push yourself a little bit. 9%. Absolutely. So does that answer that question?
That clears things up. I know people hear tithe, they immediately think the 10% thing, and it can derail the conversation.
For many people, the number in your mind is going to be 10%, and that's fine. The truth is 10%, it actually works out. For me, 10% is that sweet spot where, okay, I'm a little bit uncomfortable with this, but I'm going to do it because I'm trusting the Lord. So it tends to work out. I'm guessing that's true for a lot of you as well. So let me share with you 2 instances where I think it could be an appropriate time not to tithe. Option number 1, in the extreme case when the tithe means you cannot feed your family. That's option 1. Let me be clear. I think this is extremely rare, but I think it is possible. It's possible that you might be left with the following choice. Do I, as a Christian, either put food on the table for my loved ones, or do I put money in the offering box and trust that God is going to provide the food? I don't think either option would necessarily be sinful, but I do think wisdom would tell us that the answer should be feed your family first. And the reason I say that is because I believe in the words of 1 Timothy 5:8. If a man does not provide for the needs of his family, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. As a man especially, your first ministry is to your family. Your first extension of the Great Commission. Jesus commanded us to go into all the world, preach the gospel. But where does that start, folks? That starts with your wife and children as a man. I'm speaking to men specifically here, but it applies to everyone. Great Commission, Great Commandment is to those in your own household. Their provision comes first. So if you are faced in a situation where you cannot tithe because you are feeding your family, I think that's okay. I don't believe that's sinful. I think the grace of God is there to cover us when we can't tithe. Now, let me say this as well, though. I believe the reality of this situation is profoundly rare. Profoundly rare. It must be, I would say, an absolute last resort. Meaning, let's say you have a budget and you're over budget again, and you're thinking, okay, well, I can't tithe this month, but you also have a savings account. You also have a retirement account. That might be a question where you have to ask, okay, maybe I need to draw on my savings and use that to feed my family or something like that. And once again, that's between you and the Lord to figure out. But I want you to try to think about this, folks, that this really is a very rare situation. This is really a last resort. Most of us will probably not be faced with this, even in the lower middle class. Some of us will, though. And if you're faced with it, I want to tell you there's grace there. Feed your family first. Okay, feed your family first. That's example number one. Example number two, I think this is much more common. If your church is not faithfully preaching the gospel, if your church is not doing its job, I would say that the believer is permitted, in tune with his Holy Spirit-led conscience, to withhold the tithe from that church, sort of like when we put companies on BRI watch. If your church gets put on personally for you, it's sort of a watch where you're thinking, okay, some things are happening here that I'm not comfortable with.
And you're saying this is before you're willing to leave? Because my first thought would say, well, just get out to a different church, but I get maybe you're invested and you want to maybe see if you can change things.
You know, if you've been in this church for 10, 12, 15 years, you love this church, they're your family, and then something changes. The pastor starts preaching something erroneous. You see a gross mismanagement of money somewhere, and you think to yourself, I'm not comfortable with that. Here's what you do, I think. You have a conversation with someone. You bring it to the elders, you bring it to the pastor. If nothing comes from that, because the hope with that, Sam, obviously, is that the leadership comes to an understanding of what they've done wrong, they repent, they restore it. If nothing happens there, now what? Now I think that's when you go to the point of saying, okay, I need to find a home church where I can feel comfortable tithing in. You no longer have a tithing issue, you have a church issue. You have to find a church that is faithful. A good rule of thumb, folks, if you don't feel comfortable tithing to a particular church, you should not be a member there. If you don't feel comfortable tithing to a particular church, why are you going there? Why are you trusting your spiritual health to a congregation that you don't feel comfortable giving your money to because of this, that, or the other thing? I would tell you, right then, the situation becomes you can't stay where you're at. Don't stay where you're at and, just enjoy the freebie. Okay, well, I can go to church, so I don't have to tithe now. No, you need to get your rear end and your family's rear ends out of that church and find a faithful church where you can immediately start tithing to again.
But Seth, the donuts are so good.
I know,
at my current church.
And the coffee's great, and I love the worship, and the pastor preaches a nice feel-good sermon that doesn't convict me. That's exactly right. If that's why you're going to church, folks, again, you need to get your priorities right here, okay?
I will say that's a joke, but there's also something to the donuts, the coffee, the air conditioning, and all that for the tithe too, is that you also just don't want to be a mooch of a building's teaching, coffee, all the services they're providing you. So there is the spiritual component. Then there's just the practical component of life is where else would you just continually show up for free and take all their stuff and not give anything back?
Exactly. That's a really good point there, Sam. So those are the two examples I can think of, folks. If you got any more, you're welcome to share them in the chat. Outside of those two, I can't think of any other nuance around the command.
I knew someone whose sister was very sick, and she had to spend quite a bit of money supporting her, giving her money. And our pastor for a time said, don't worry about tithing. Consider that sort of your tithe at the moment.
Even in that, Sam, I would put that under the umbrella of category number one. That
it's an alternate version of that.
That's exactly right. Yeah, good stuff. Well, hope that made sense, folks. If we stirred up controversy in the chat, I'll check it out during the Ag Report. Here comes the Ag, and then we've got more financial issues coming up right after this. Stick with us.
This is Craig Haugaard with your Financial Issues Ag Update for July 29th. Corn was lower yesterday as a big crop feels closer and closer to being realized. Traders were aggressive sellers in spite of weekly export inspections that came in above the top end of what the trade was looking for. The crop progress report shows silking at 76%, with 26% of the crop in the dough stage. And we did see conditions fall by 1% down to 73% good to excellent. That was in line with the average trade estimates and 5% better than last year at this point. December December corn finished the day a nickel lower at $4.14 per bushel. Soybeans were lower as the weather continues to be near perfect. The Corn Belt is on pace to have its wettest July since 1993. For the week, we saw good to excellent ratings improve by 2% to 70% good to excellent. Years with similar good to excellent conditions on this date have averaged 3.5% above trendline yields. We had November beans 9.5 cents lower at 10.11.5. Wheat was weighed down by weaker corn prices and a stronger U.S. dollar. Weekly export inspections were disappointing. That also created headwinds for the wheat market. We had Minneapolis September wheat 3.25 cents lower at 5.81.5. Kansas City dropped by 0.5 cent to close at 5.26, and Chicago was 0.5 cent higher at 5.38.5. Cotton futures continued their aimless sideways wandering. We had December futures finishing the day 11 points higher at 68.34. Livestock futures were stronger to start the week. October live cattle rose by $1.62.5, closing at $224.77.5 per hundredweight. September feeder cattle were $2.35 higher as they closed at $334.55 per hundred. And we had October lean hog futures 27.5 cents stronger at $90.87.5 per hundredweight. Class 3 milk futures started the week with a little bit of a bounce. The closing bell August futures was 17 points higher, ending the day at 17.40. This has been Craig Haugaard with your Financial Issues Ag Update. We'll be right back with more financial issues after this.
It's up to us to stand up and say, enough is enough. All of this unbiblical stuff that's going on, whether it's abortion or transsexual or LGBTQ, widespread pornography, human trafficking. Bottom line, it's still up to us. If we stop investing in these corporations that are trying to destroy us, sooner or later they're going to wake up.
To learn more about biblically responsible mutual funds and ETFs, go to timothyplan.com.
In the last 10 to 15 years being in ministry, being married, something that has been constant in our lives is Samaritan Ministries. As we've moved, we've had babies, we've had different things come up, we have just been able to rely on Samaritan in ways that we never really even thought about before becoming members.
Our heart's desire is to plant roots and be in a place for a really long time. It's how we were raised. We see the benefits of that, but we also see the open-handedness of being used by the Lord wherever He calls, because we just assumed when we started pursuing church planting, the quickest way to get from point A to point B is a straight line. And with the Lord, sometimes you find out it looks a lot more like this. And yet, Samaritan was with us through the entire thing.
We didn't have to look into, we have to change insurances now because we've moved states or whatever the case may be. And it's just been a real blessing to us in different phases of life.
I'm Kyle.
I'm Colleen.
And we're the Gen X.
And we're Samaritan members.
Hi, this is Shana Bird, the host of Financial Issues. The Financial Issues family is so blessed to have saved tens of thousands of babies, all thanks to the generous support of you, our listeners and viewers. For $140, you can sponsor 5 ultrasounds. Please go to preborn.org, that's preborn.org, or financialissues.org and click on the Preborn logo. Save a baby, save a life.
The opinions and recommendations expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the opinions of the station or any of the program sponsors. Additionally, all products or services offered by the program sponsors may not be known by the program.
Welcome back, folks. Good to be here with you today. We're having a good time here on the show. Hey, I have a special guest joining me on the program today, Andy Thrift. Andy is a certified financial planner. He's also the chartered advisor of philanthropy with Market Street Wealth Advisors here in the Philadelphia area. I'm so excited to have Andy on here. Let me quickly give a disclaimer, just like with when we have Shana on, just so we can keep our compliance people happy here. But let me just say that strategies, concepts discussed are for educational purposes only, and investing carries an inherent element of risk, which you all know that by now. Of course, no guarantee of financial success or specific investment results. Andy, we got that out of the way and we survived, brother. Welcome to the show.
We're compliant. Thanks so much for having me, Seth. Great to be here. Love this.
Absolutely, Andy. Yeah, we're so delighted and blessed to get to have you. So let's kick it off here. We've kind kind of have this notion of wanting to fund the kingdom of God as Christians. I think that's so important. But there is also kind of this, I think at the same time, there's this pull for us with our money that we need to, in some ways, fund Uncle Sam as well. Can you speak to this for just a moment, Andy? What do you mean by the idea of funding the kingdom of God versus funding Uncle Sam?
Absolutely. So I predominantly work with retirees. And sometimes when I come across believers, a lot of the people I work with are believers, is they're following just a standard protocol. Take your IRA, 401k, 403b. It's all the same thing, by the way, pre-tax retirement dollars. Defer that as long as possible because we get deferred taxation. Isn't that great? Take other assets to live on. And then unfortunately, people are healthy, we're living for longer. They turn 73 or 75, depending on the age and date of birth. And then they have to start taking distributions from those accounts. And they sneak into higher tax brackets than they ever believed. And Uncle Sam is cheering them along the way. And then if they're paying attention, we call her Aunt Irma. Aunt Irma writes you a letter in November and says, hey, you're one of the rich people. Great. You get to pay more for Medicare as well. And I think people are unknowingly contributing far more than they should to our wonderful country via the IRS, via these distributions.
Gosh, Uncle Sam, Aunt Irma, you can't escape them, can you, Andy? It's really frustrating.
It's a great time for strategy, which is why I so respect what you guys are doing, just educating people. I love it.
Absolutely. Andy, why don't we get into that just a bit here? What would you say, and once again, I know some of this might be tax strategy, so of course contacting a tax professional would be good, but in your experience, what would be some good practical ways just for maybe people to start thinking about how they can keep as much of their money, their hard-earned money that Uncle Sam legally steals, that they can keep as much of it from that in themselves, but really so that they can use it to bless the kingdom of God. How do we do this?
Yeah, great question, Seth. One of the things we say to people all the time is the man or woman who wins is not the one that pays the least amount of tax in a tax year. It's the person who pays the least amount of tax over the course of their life. Mm-hmm. So often when we go into retirement, all of a sudden we're not paying FICA tax. We're not paying often state tax if we live in a state that doesn't tax distributions. And we love our tax return. And it's 4, maybe 5%, and we're cheering along. When we see these tax returns, we very gently remind people we have squandered an opportunity to get money out of some pre-tax retirement accounts into a Roth IRA and pay such a little amount of tax on that. But often people are like, wait, and I actually have an email, Seth, I'll say this briefly, from one of my clients where we did this. We did a Roth conversion. We took money from a pre-tax IRA, put it into a Roth IRA. And I literally have an email, I should have it framed in my office, where a CPA said to my client, you're getting killed on taxes. And of course, we responded, professionally a little bit to say, my goal is the exact opposite, that my client pays the least amount of tax over a lifetime. Did he have to pay a little bit of tax this year to set up that successful future? Yes, he did.
That's such a good point there too, Andy, of first of all, the fact that you are paying taxes is indicative of something that is good, meaning you succeeded. I do think that's unfortunately the way that our country works with this stuff is, you get punished more for succeeding. It doesn't really seem right to me, but it can be something that is, encouraging also. And then secondly, what you just mentioned there, making that payment up front to be able to be blessed later, I think is so huge. And that's really kind of what I want to get to with this next question here. Talking about generosity while we're still living, I would love for you to share with our listeners some tax savvy ways believers can increase their giving now. So like, for example, I'm relatively young. I'm contributing to my retirement funds. I have not built up the massive amount of wealth that some older folks have, but how can I increase my giving now as well?
Sure. Yeah. Couple strategies that we do. One makes sense regardless of your age. They're called donor advised funds. And then another one makes sense when we're in our 70s and 80s and 90s, and we can gift money out of an IRA. Probably heard the term before. A lot of your listeners are familiar. If not, look it up, or we can help you understand a little bit more. So QCDs, qualified charitable distribution. from an IRA, instead of taking a distribution that we have to take from our IRA while we're living and then giving it to our church, we can send it straight to our church. Pay attention, everybody. Aunt Irma doesn't see it. Amazing. When we send money directly from our IRA to a nonprofit, doesn't hit our tax return, doesn't affect our Medicare premiums. Wonderful. When we are younger, or perhaps we have a really significant investment account, non-qualified account, another name for that, and we want to be generous, we should really look up and really do a deep dive on the great strategies, what's called donor advised funds. When we do donor advised funds, to make math super, super simple, if there is a particular time in our life, maybe we're exiting a company where we had company stock, or we happen to purchase NVIDIA 5 years ago, and I just noticed in my account it's up to a really large number. If we gift away a highly appreciated stock, must be a long-term highly appreciated stock, we do not need to pay the tax on that. Great, we saved ourselves 23.8%, 20% long-term capital gain bracket. That's one for wealthy people. 3.8% net investment income tax. We didn't have to pay 23.8%. And we have the double benefit of 100% of that gift is written off via our Schedule A. Okay. That was very confusing. That was insider talk. But very simply, many of the people that I work with, when they give away $100,000 or $1 million, it costs them about 50%. To which they say, wow, that means I can give away more. And then I have a lot of fun with this, Seth. What I actually say is, well, we're going to put the money into a donor advised fund. We're actually not going to give it all away this year to certain charities that I know you're passionate about. We're going to put it in a holding vehicle called a donor advised fund, and we're going to grow that for you. And one of my most fun conversations I have with families is a couple years later, I say, oh, by the way, fun thing just before you leave, the next $42,000 you give away isn't even your money. It's just the reasonable conservative return in your donor advised fund. And that way is, so there's so many tax benefits up front, Seth, so many along the way. The idea of creating kind of your own endowment fund for funding the kingdom of God, that is not for people worth $3 billion. It can be for people that make $60,000 a year. And they can tuck away money in a donor advised fund, give away the interest each year, get a great tax benefit, but most importantly, fund the kingdom of God and not fund Uncle Sam's pockets.
Andy, that's so well said. Let's bring it back, a little bit now as we have, just a little bit of time left here. How would you advise Christians to view the concept of estate planning? It's different than unbelievers. This is something that gets me really excited.
It completely is.
Yeah.
So, something I heard recently on a podcast about generosity, which was outstanding. I'll go kind of two spots on this, Seth. Firstly, we've got verses. I don't have them memorized or know exactly where they are. By the way, I used to be a pastor for 12 years. Love the spiritual component of what you guys do.
That's awesome.
But the concept of giving our children's children an inheritance, that is biblical. There's no debating that. Now, what we should debate is, and I'm stealing this from another podcast, I would just encourage your listeners, let's give your children a leg up. Let's not give them two legs up on the couch. So we should be very shrewd and careful and to make sure we are helping and not hurting our children by giving them significant wealth. So we stole the grit from them. We stole the ability for them to push through hard bosses in their 20s, right? So there's a piece of, I think we should be careful on the amount of money that we give to our children and even grandchildren. And then a second piece that I just, is, can we be tax savvy on that? Can we do Roth conversions? Can we get a step up in basis in a non-qualified account? Can we have maybe a third of our money left over by the time we pass away in an IRA? Here's my recommendation for the beneficiary on that. Your church. Do you know how much tax someone will pay? 0. Your church won't pay a IRA. If you're saying, hey, I got $1 million, $2 million in there, why don't you make your donor advised fund the beneficiary of your IRA? And a last quick thing just to remind you of, Seth, this is tremendous. This is from National Christian Foundation, which I'm sure you guys are very, very familiar with. Some people are nervous. If I do that, there's going to be so much money in this donor advised fund. Are my kids going to give it to the right places? Is it going to fund the kingdom of God? Is it going to... maybe fund some things that my child who went a little bit off the ranch is excited about, but is a 501c3, but isn't the kingdom of God. When you create a donor advised fund and you say, hey, I want to make sure beyond my passing.
Andy, I'm so sorry to have to do this, brother. I'm going to have to cut you off here, but we need to have you on another time, man. I appreciate you. Andy, thank you so much for joining us. Folks, we're going to have Andy on at a later time to continue this conversation. For it's all his, the Lord's. Let's be found good and faithful stewards with all of it. God bless you all. See you next time.
If we ever forget that we're one nation under God, then we will be a nation gone under.
Thank you for joining us. This has been an FISM production.